When Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine in February 2022, few people imagined that the Ukraine war would last very long. After all, Moscow's power seemed overwhelming, and it seemed little could stop Putin's soldiers from taking the country. Yet, here we are, in the middle of a war that is now in its 11th month, and that has redefined assumptions about everything, from geopolitics and financial markets to energy supplies and food security. For India, 2022 was defined by the war in Ukraine, and there are a few reasons for this. First, the fighting in Ukraine has forced India to look long and hard at its own defense policy. Russia, a military that possessed superior artillery, air power, mechanized units, and manpower, was first blocked and then pushed back by Ukraine's much smaller armed forces, backed by Western weaponry. Russia's experience holds some key lessons for global militaries and for India in particular. For example, the war has demonstrated just how effective drones and other unmanned weapon systems have been, since both Moscow and Kyiv have used these assets effectively. While India has funded drone development and some swarm drones have been acquired, a slow military procurement system has meant that the country still hasn't acquired these capabilities in a big way. Further, Russia's air force and tank units struggled during the Ukraine war, which isn't encouraging for New Delhi given that so much of India's air platforms and tank power are Russian-made. While much of Russia's failure can be put down to bad tactics, some analysts are pointing out that weapons like the tank may simply be unsuited to modern warfare. Russia's prolonged use of munitions and missiles against Ukraine has meant that its stockpiles are running low, and Moscow has had difficulty manufacturing the replacement it needs to fight the war. That raises key questions about whether India, which is a smaller munitions pile than Russia, has the firepower it takes to fight a long war. While that debate will continue, it is clear that the Ukraine war has pushed India to take a fresh look at some parts of its defense policy. Ukraine has also defined Indian diplomacy in 2022. That was because the war has pitted the past against the future. On one hand is New Delhi's strong historic relationship with Moscow, which has largely been a reliable friend for India since 1947. However, the relationship with Russia has largely grown only in a few fields like defense and energy, where Moscow sells India weapons and oil. On the other hand, India has its growing relationship with the West, and especially with the United States. India and the West have common interests in countering China, boosting trade, and encouraging technological innovation. The war put the America-led West and Russia on a collision course, and India's year was spent trying to balance both sides. Ukraine exposed certain fault lines in India's relationship with the West. New Delhi's refusal to condemn Russia for its invasion caused tensions with US President Biden, calling India shaky on Ukraine. India's tradition of strategic autonomy, or maximizing options through strong relationships with a range of different partners, has been tested severely, and New Delhi had to defend its position in global forums numerous times this year. While most Western governments are now publicly understanding of India's relationship with Russia, the tensions over India's position in the Ukraine war highlight a key difference. New Delhi's pursuit of options and its national interest above everything else will continue to sit uncomfortably with the West. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian war also exposed the country's defense dependence on Russia. According to some estimates, 70 to 85% of India's military platforms are of Russian origin. While dependence is one problem, the Ukraine war and Western sanctions in particular have also pushed Russia closer to India's main strategic rival, China. A closer relationship where Moscow is dependent on Beijing to keep its economy going is deeply worrying to India, which does not want to lose a key partner. So 2022 and the Ukraine war forced India to take a long, hard look at its diplomatic relationships. And then there was the economic fallout of the war. Western financial sanctions hammered Russia's economy, which responded with energy sanctions of its own, and it also stopped the flow of agricultural products from Ukraine. This weaponization of financial systems, food supplies, and energy flows led to an increase in the price of basic commodities. In line with the rest of the world, India's stock market fell. The rupee's value decreased because of economic uncertainty, and forex reserves also took a hit. While India took measures to manage its economic problems at home, New Delhi must ironically now worry about the economic health of European and American economies. Partly because of the inflation and economic pain caused by Russian sanctions, Eurozone economies seem headed for recession, while developed countries generally have seen a sharp slowdown in their growth projections. That will have consequences for the Indian economy, which is counting on export growth, especially to developed markets like Europe, for the country's future economic growth. Those economic concerns like food security and stable supplies of energy, which stem directly from the Ukraine war, will also define India's presidency of the G20, which began this month in December. India's moment at the head of one of the world's most important multilateral forums may be spent restoring the trust that was broken by the West's weaponization of financial systems and Russia's weaponization of energy supplies. Further, helping vulnerable developing countries deal with the inflation and economic fallout of the Ukraine war, which shows no sign of ending in the near future, will also be a focus for India's foreign policy and G20 presidency. Across defense, diplomacy, and economics, the Ukraine war raised several key questions for New Delhi. As we start 2023, India will be looking for answers.